Hey everybody, Ryan Medora here, and welcome back to another bass lesson. And today I am very excited because we're going to talk a lot about different positions to play triads. So if you're trying to learn your fretboard and get more comfortable with different shapes, this is like the #1 thing that I would say you should practice, which is basically learning how to play triads, both major and minor, with 3 different positions depending upon your starting finger. Now, this is kind of a lot of information, but I promise you we'll break it down and make sense of it. And this is also a really good video to kind of like get tab notation for, practice along to. So if you want to grab that, head over to my Patreon page and you can find it there. And in the meantime, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, do all the things. But we're gonna drop some knowledge on you right now to help you really learn and understand your fretboard and how to play different triads. So let's get into it. So the whole concept of this lesson is to realize that one of the difficult things about this instrument is we can find the same note in multiple places, and then we also have a lot of different fingering patterns and positions to play certain concepts. So a musical concept like a major triad or a minor triad will have a variety of options in terms of where we play it, how we play it, the position, where we are on the fretboard, how we go ascending or descending. There are a million variables, so it can be really overwhelming. But a way to break it down and start to understand it, I think, is by thinking about a lot of triad positions as a 3-finger kind of format where we can choose one of 3 starting fingers to play our triad, and that will give us a particular shape. So to break this down, we're going to start with our major triad. So if we're in the key of C and we're just going to start playing a C major triad, we're usually going to go immediately to our 4-fret span position, where we kind of use our middle finger to play C right here on the 3rd fret. We use our index finger to play the 3rd of the chord E, and then we use our pinky to play the 5th of the chord G. So this is our basic 4-fret span major triad pattern. If you don't know this, practice this, learn this. First and foremost, super important. So we have our basic 4-fret span major triad pattern where we're starting with our middle finger. Now that's really important because we are going to do another triad shape where we're playing exactly the same triad, but now we're going to use what I call a 5-fret span, and we're going to start with our index finger. So the shape is going to be like this, where I'm using my index finger on the C. To find the 3rd, the E, I'm going to jump up on the same string and play it here on the 7th fret of my A string using my pinky. So I'm going index, kind of doing a little bit of a jump to use my pinky, and then I'm going to use my middle finger to play the G on the same fret as I did before, but it's going to look very different from a finger position standpoint. So if we think about it as 4-fret span shape versus 5-fret span shape, we have our 4-fret span starting with our middle finger, and then our 5-fret span starting with our index finger. Now you should realize that these sound exactly the same. They're totally the same. They're the same C, E, G, C major triad. We're just changing the position that we play. And I'd like to think about our 4-fret span as kind of taking a horizontal approach to the neck, where we're kind of staying in one position, and our 5-fret span is kind of our vertical position where we start to kind of shift up the fretboard. And that's going to be really important because, depending upon where you choose to play something, you want to figure out how to move up and down the fretboard. Now, we've done 2 out of 3 shapes. Let's dig into this 3rd shape. Now, this is going to be interesting because we're going to be starting with our pinky. We're going to do a pinky position major triad. And to do so, instead of starting here on my 3rd fret, where I would kind of run out of strings or be in open string land, I'm going to use my 8th fret on the E string to play the C major triad like so. So I'm starting with my pinky on the C here on the 8th fret. I'm going to use my ring finger to hit the E on the 7th fret of my A string, and then I'm going to use my index finger to play the G here on the 5th fret of my D string. So the interesting thing about this is that the G is actually played in the same place right here, this 5th fret of our D string. We're playing that G in the same place with all 3 triad shapes, with our 4-fret span middle finger, with our 5-fret span index finger, and then with our 4-fret span pinky. This G is kind of our true north that stays consistent. It just is played with a different finger every time, so it kind of seems like it's in a different place, but it's not. It's right here. It's not going anywhere. But this 4-fret span pinky position is really good because, again, we kind of like open up our fretboard in a new way where we can play our C major triad here and it'll sound very similar because it's the same notes. We are just now kind of bringing ourselves to a new place on the fretboard. So if you think about it, we have these three really important major triad shapes, ones that start with our middle finger, our index, and our pinky. Now let's go and talk about our minor shapes because we can kind of use that same exact process as we talk about our minor patterns. So now we're going to start on A minor. So if you think about, being in the key of C major, A minor is going to be like our sixth chord. It's like naturally within the key. It's diatonic. You could even play an A minor scale. If you want to, if you don't know this scale, you should probably get this under your fingertips, but we're going to kind of start from this position. And again, we're going to talk about 4-fret and 5-fret span triad positions depending upon what finger we're using. So we're going to start with our index finger this time. And we're going to play our A minor triad by playing our index finger on the root note. We're going to get the third, which is C, with our pinky here on the 8th fret. We're familiar with that note. We just played that note before. And then we're going to get the E here with our ring finger. So position-wise, 4-fret span, index, pinky, ring finger to play this particular minor triad shape. So that's shape number 1 for our minor triad, starting with our index finger. Now we're going to do a 5-fret span minor triad shape, where we are going to start with our middle finger this time. So I'm going to put my middle finger on that A here. Now I'm going to find the C here with my index finger. So I'm going to go and kind of find my original starting C on the 3rd fret of my A string. I'm going to kind of shift up a little bit to get that, and then bounce up to use my pinky to play the E. So I'm going to go A, C, E, doing my 5-fret span shape. So middle finger, index, pinky, to kind of get that like elongated kind of vertical approach to playing this minor triad. So this is a really great figure to have under your fingertips. So we have done our minor triad with the index finger, 4-fret span, our minor triad with the middle finger, 5-fret span, and now we're going to do our pinky position because we can't forget about the pinky. And this is going to be a 4-fret span shape. And now we're going to put our pinky here on the root note on the A. We're going to use our middle finger to find the C on the 3rd fret of our A string, and then we're going to use our index finger to play the E, the 5th of the chord. And so this will just fall really nicely on the fretboard. Again, pinky, middle, index to play this 4-fret span minor triad shape, starting with our pinky finger. So we've gone over a lot. Go practice these things first before you start putting together, because now we're going to show you how to put them together to practice this as kind of like a full exercise. But before you do that, make sure you have all 3 of these different positions down and that you're really comfortable. You're using the appropriate fingering. I can't stress that enough. Like having good technique and using the proper fingers is like really the name of the game here. And so now we're going to start putting them together, and we're going to use a really basic diatonic chord progression, meaning we're sticking to the rules of the key, and we're going to play a 1-6-2-5. Now, this is probably one of the most common chord progressions in a lot of jazz, like a lot of like early pop and rock and roll, kind of like 60s soul music. This is just a really common chord progression, and it's great for practicing triads because the 1 and the 5 chord use major shapes, and then the 6 and the 2 chords use minor shapes. So the great thing is we can take all of the patterns that we just learned and we can kind of start to adapt them and use them to play through a chord progression. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So to begin, we're going to take just a 4-fret span approach, where we're going to stay in one position on the fretboard, and we're going to start with our 4-fret span middle finger major triad shape on the C. We're going to use our pinky position figure to play a minor triad on the A minor. We're going to take that 1 string over to D minor, our 2 chord, and then we're going to go to G and play a major triad, again using our middle finger. So the name of the game here is we're basically just limiting ourselves to 2 shapes. We have our major triad with the middle finger, and then our minor triad with our pinky. And then we're just using the appropriate triad for the chord. So we've got a major chord on the C, minor chord on the A, minor chord on the D, and then major chord on the G. And so if you put this together and you kind of give it like a nice kind of like easygoing feel, all of a sudden it feels like we're playing a Sam Cooke tune. Nothing wrong with that. I encourage it. I love it. And this is a great way to start practicing using these different patterns for triads and using it in a chord progression so it sounds nice and musical. So that is exercise 1 that we can play through. Now we're going to take a look at using our 5-fret span triad shapes. So we're going to basically play exactly the same chord progression. We're going to go C major, A minor, D minor, G major, but we're going to use our 5-fret span shapes. So we're going to start with our index finger to play our C major and do that nice kind of like elongated, more vertical approach. Then we're going to go to our A minor chord, starting with our middle finger to play that minor shape. Then we're going to move that over 1 string to D minor. And then we're going to go down here to play the G using our major shape. So the cool thing about this is we're now just using our 5-fret span versions of things, which is going to give us a little bit more of like an open feeling, a more vertical feeling on the fretboard, and just give us other options. But again, we're kind of using that same pattern and that same practice where we're doing our 5-fret span shapes, just doing major on the C chord, minor on the A, minor on the D, and then major on the G. And there it is. We can give it that same kind of like soul R&B feel. And there it is. Practice that all day long. It's going to be great. And again, be really conscious of using the appropriate fingers for doing these different triad shapes. So now we've got one more fun thing to practice, which is taking advantage of some of our pinky position triad shapes and using a kind of movement up the neck. We're kind of going in this direction. So now we're going to start with our C on the 8th fret here. And I'm going to begin with my major triad shape using the pinky position. So here's my C major. For my minor, I'm going to use my A minor starting with my index finger. So kind of that very first shape that we went over for minor triads using that index finger minor triad shape for the A. I'm going to do the same thing on the D chord. And now the G chord is going to be a little bit interesting. We're going to stay in this position. So rather than going down and finding our G here on the 3rd fret, we're going to use this G here on the 5th fret, and we're going to use our 5-fret span major triad shape because this is just what fits both the register and the position that we're in. So we're going to do basically our pinky position 4-fret span major shape, our index finger position minor shape starting on the A, same thing on the D, and then when we get to the G, we're going to use our 5-fret span starting index, pinky, middle there, and then we can jump back and return to that C. So as we play it this way, again, we can kind of give it that same rhythm. And there it is. So again, this is a great thing to practice because it just gives you 3 different positions on the fretboard to play things, whether you're using 4-fret span and 5-fret span, and it really puts all of these to work. So each one of these exercises, again, is really playing the same thing, but learning how to do it in a different way. So when it comes down to fretboard knowledge and like understanding triads and knowing how to use your fretboard and maneuver, this is like a really crucial concept to have under your fingertips, is knowing that you can do a lot of the same moves in different ways and in different places. And the reason why that becomes important is because you can start to mix and match these things, where if you get comfortable with all these different triad shapes, you can kind of fly around the fretboard and do all different things by combining these shapes and just knowing what to do. So you can go and use a combo platter of 5-fret and 4-fret span shapes and take yourself into different positions like this. So, you can just see some of the movement and the freedom that I have. And if I want to get more complex, I can change the order of the arpeggio. So instead of playing root 3rd 5th, I can play root 5th 3rd. So for instance, if I wanted to do that, I just created another bass line just by saying, oh, instead of playing the pattern root third fifth, I'm going to play root fifth third and just give it a slightly different feel. But again, I kind of stayed within the confines of using my 4-fret span shapes over here. But there's a lot of flexibility you have. So just know that this is a great way to practice and gain some of that fretboard freedom that we're all seeking. So if you want to get tab notation, anything like that for these exercises, please head over to my Patreon page. You can get it there. And in the meantime, happy practicing, everybody. Keep it groovy.